Do you know what one of the most bombed places on Earth was during the Second World War? Have you ever had one of those debates on which civilian area had the most bomb hits per square mile during World War II? Welcome back to Jaxom Talks. Today we're stepping into the eye of the storm. We're going to talk about a piece of rock, barely 17 miles long. It became the single most dangerous, most bombed, and arguably most important strategic location in the Mediterranean theater of World War II. This is the story of Malta. During the early days of the war, while the titanic battles of the Eastern Front raged and the British Expeditionary Force regrouped after Dunkirk, a small island colony south of Sicily found itself standing alone. It endured a siege that would last for over 2.5 years, suffering some of the most sustained and brutal bombing campaigns in military history, giving it the nickname, the most bombed place on Earth. But why? Why did the Axis powers spend so much effort trying to crush this tiny speck, and why did the Allies sacrifice so much to hold it? The answer, as we'll discover today, is simple. Malta wasn't just defending itself. It was the linchpin. It was the crucial choke point that determined the fate of the entire North African campaign. If Malta fell, Rommel won? It's that simple. Winston Churchill famously described the island as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, and he wasn't wrong. But before it could live up to that name, it had to endure one of the most intense and sustained bombing campaigns in history. The Siege of Malta had begun. To understand the siege, we first have to understand geography. Look at the map. Malta is situated almost perfectly in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. It's about 60 miles south of Sicily, and crucially, only about 200 miles from the North African coast. Before the war, Malta gave the British Royal Navy a huge advantage. It was a vital naval and air base, the perfect refueling, resupply, and repair stop for ships passing through the Suez Canal and Gibraltar. But once the war began, and specifically once Italy entered the war in June 1940, Malta's importance became absolutely critical and instantly perilous. For the Axis, primarily the Italians and later the Germans, the entire war effort in North Africa depended on shipping vital supplies. Fuel, ammunition, tanks, food, and men had to get from Italy across the Mediterranean to the ports of Tripoli and Benghazi in Libya. Malta sat directly across those supply lines. It was a permanent, fixed base, an unsinkable aircraft carrier that, as the phrase goes, is right at the enemy's throat. From Malta, British submarines, surface warships, and most importantly the RAF and Royal Naval Air Service aircraft could strike any Axis convoy attempting to cross the central Mediterranean. It was a natural interdiction point. Mussolini and later Hitler knew that as long as Malta remained in British hands, their supply line to the Afrika Korps would be constantly threatened, constantly bleeding. The Axis faced a choice: either neutralize Malta completely or lose the North African campaign through slow logistical strangulation. The siege began almost immediately after Italy declared war on June 10, 1940. The first raids came fast and heavy, but when it came to Malta's initial defense, well, that was almost comically thin. When the bombs started falling, the entire air defense force consisted of just 4 antiquated Gloster Gladiator biplanes. These were completely outclassed by the Italian bombers. One was kept for spare parts, leaving just 3 to fly. They were famously named Faith, Hope, and Charity. These 3 biplanes became an immediate legend, representing the impossible, almost mythic resistance of the islanders. They flew reconnaissance, interception, and defense missions until reinforcements in the shape of a squadron of Hawker Hurricane arrived later that summer. But the sheer lack of resources defined the early days. The island wasn't just short on aircraft. It was short on everything. Food, fuel, medical supplies, and even water were always scarce. By late 1940, the Italians were finding the going tougher than they expected. The defenses, though meager, were tenacious. The Maltese people, alongside the British garrison, proved extremely resilient. But the real peril arrived in January 1941. That's when the Germans showed up. With the British successfully interdicting the Axis convoys from the sea, Hitler was forced to commit German air power into the Mediterranean in order to secure his supply lines. The 10th Fliegerkorps, an entire Luftwaffe Air Corps, was transferred to Sicily. The nature of the siege changed instantly. German Junkers, Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, high-altitude Dornier Do-17s and Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters brought a new level of terror and precision. They targeted the harbors, the airfields, and the essential infrastructure. The goal was a simple one: to make the island unusable as a military base. Over the next months they succeeded in making it a living hell. This was the reality of life in Malta. Constant, relentless terror. The islanders spent much of the next 2 years living in subterranean rock-hewn shelters, turning the entire island into a vast, fortified underground city. Now, let's get to the core of this discussion. Why was the defense of Malta the key to winning in North Africa? The war in North Africa, the Desert War, was a logistical contest above all else. Rommel's Afrika Corps and the Italian forces were fighting thousands of miles from their main production centers. Everything they needed, fuel for their tanks, shells for their artillery, food for their men, all had to cross the Mediterranean. It was a vast yet thin umbilical cord stretching across the sea. Malta was the pair of scissors regularly cutting into it. Every Axis convoy had to pass within striking distance of the island. The men stationed in Malta, the pilots, the submariners and naval captains, were masters of interdiction. Think about Rommel's legendary successes. He was brilliant, a master tactician, but his biggest enemy wasn't the British Army. It was lack of fuel. He constantly had to stop, not because he was defeated, but because his tanks were running on empty. The reason they were running on empty was Malta. In the most critical phases of the Desert War, specifically late 1941 and early 1942, it is estimated that up to one-third of all Axis shipping headed for North Africa was sunk or severely damaged by forces operating from Malta. That's 1 out of every 3 ships. Imagine being a quartermaster in Tripoli, waiting for 3 tankers, and knowing only 2 will make it, or even worse, only 1. The Royal Navy submarines, operating from the fortified Grand Harbour, known as the Silent Service, they were devastating, sinking hundreds of thousands of tons of Axis shipping. In addition to this, the RAF reconnaissance aircraft and strike bombers, like the Wellingtons and later the formidable Beaufighters, worked in tandem, coordinating sea strikes with incredible efficiency. The cumulative effect was staggering. By the time Rommel launched his final, desperate push at El Alamein in the summer of 1942, he was chronically short of everything. He had superior tanks initially, but no fuel to run them. The British had supplied via the longer but safer route around the Cape of Good Hope. This gave them a massive logistical advantage. The blood, sweat and tears shed by the Maltese people and the garrison holding that island directly translated into empty fuel tanks and starving soldiers in the western desert. The defense of Malta wasn't a sideshow. It was the mechanism by which the Axis logistical machine was slowly ground to a halt. The Axis understood this connection. They realized that their strategy of simply bombing the base was failing because the islanders were too resilient. So, in the spring of 1942, the Luftwaffe launched a final cataclysmic effort to annihilate the island. This period, from March to May 1942, was the height of the siege. For a few weeks, Malta was bombed almost every day, sometimes for hours on end, by hundreds of German and Italian aircraft. In April alone, over 6,700 tons of bombs were dropped, over 15,000 tons in total during the siege. That's more than dropped on London during the entire Blitz. You also have to realize London is almost 5 times the size of Malta. The Maltese Islands became the most intensively bombed area in history. Life was reduced to a brutal struggle for survival. Food rations were cut to starvation levels, fresh water was scarce and ammunition was low. During this time, airfields were so heavily cratered that ground crews often had only a few hours of darkness to repair them before the next dawn raid. The people were on the brink of collapse. The morale, however, was galvanized by one of the most remarkable acts of recognition in the war. In April 1942, King George VI awarded the George Cross, the highest British award for civilian bravery, to the entire island of Malta, not to an individual, but to the collective people. The citation read, "To honor her brave people, I award the George Cross to the island fortress of Malta, to bear witness to a heroism and devotion that will long be remembered in the free world." This singular act provided a huge morale boost, reminding the exhausted islanders that the world had not forgotten them, but the most desperate time was yet to come, the great convoy battles of 1942. The supply situation was so dire that by the summer of 1942, Malta was facing surrender due to starvation. They had to be resupplied. The plan to resolve this, Operation Pedestal. This was arguably the most famous and fiercely contested convoy battle of the war. In August 1942, a massive convoy of 14 merchant ships set sail for Malta. This was protected by 4 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, 7 cruisers, and dozens of destroyers. The Axis threw everything they had at them: submarines, torpedo bombers, high-altitude bombers, and fast surface ships. The Mediterranean turned into a slaughterhouse. Ship after ship was sunk. The British lost an aircraft carrier, 2 cruisers, and 9 out of the 14 merchant ships. It was a tactical disaster in terms of losses, but strategically, it was a triumph. 5 merchant ships made it through, delivering just enough food and fuel to keep the island in the fight. One particular ship, the oil tanker SS Ohio, became the symbol of this epic struggle. Despite being torpedoed, repeatedly bombed, and having her back broken, she refused to sink. She was lashed between 2 destroyers and literally towed, barely afloat, into Grand Harbour, arriving on August 15th, the Feast of Santa Maria, which is how the convoy is now remembered. The fuel and supplies from those 5 ships bought Malta the precious time it needed. It bought time for the balance of power to shift. Why didn't the Axis just invade Malta as they had in other locations? They planned to. Operation Hercules was the joint German-Italian airborne and seaborne invasion plan. They had the troops. They had the experience from the successful airborne assault on Crete. They could have done it. But Hitler, preoccupied and overconfident after early victories on the Eastern Front, diverted the vast majority of his resources, including the entire invasion force, to the Soviet Union. Mussolini hesitated, worried about the vast losses the Italian Navy would suffer in a frontal assault. This delay was fatal for the Axis. While they dithered, the Allies kept pouring resources into Malta, however costly. Crucially, they started delivering Supermarine Spitfires. These weren't just any Spitfires. They were the latest Mark 5B fighters, often flown directly from Allied aircraft carriers, the famous club runs. The infusion of these superior fighters, combined with advanced ground radar systems, was the game changer. By the autumn of 1942, the RAF was consistently shooting down more Axis aircraft than they were losing. Air superiority shifted decisively to the British, and this was the final nail in the Axis logistical coffin. With Allied air cover now protecting the island, the raids on Axis convoys intensified even further. The roles at last had been reversed. Malta was no longer desperately defending itself. It was now aggressively launching strike after strike. By October 1942, when Montgomery launched his massive counterattack at the Second Battle of El Alamein, Rommel was running on fumes, while Montgomery had a vast, secure supply line. Rommel's failure to get the supplies he needed, directly due to Malta's interdiction efforts, led to his ultimate defeat and retreat in North Africa. The defense of Malta was the slow logistical dagger that fatally wounded the Afrika Korps. With North Africa secured in May 1943, Malta's role transformed completely. The defensive fortress became the ultimate forward launchpad. In July 1943, Malta was the staging area for the massive Allied invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky. Ships and hundreds of thousands of men gathered in the waters around Malta, an island that just a few months earlier was fighting for its very survival. General Eisenhower famously said that the Maltese people's contribution was invaluable to the Allied victory in the Mediterranean. The story of Malta is a powerful reminder that wars are won not just by generals and grand armies, but by geography, logistics, and above all else, the impossible tenacity of ordinary people. The Maltese endured an unimaginable hell of around 4,300 air raid alerts, over 15,000 tons of bombs dropped, thousands of casualties, but they never gave up. They held that island against all odds. By doing so, they ensured that the supplies needed to keep Rommel fighting never reached him. This fundamentally enabled the Allied victory in North Africa and opening the door to the invasion of Europe. Malta was not just a base. It was the ultimate strategic weapon, an unyielding, unsinkable aircraft carrier. What do you think was the most incredible act of heroism during the Siege of Malta? Was it the 3 gladiators, faith, hope, and charity, or the sheer determination of the crew of the SS Ohio? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into this fascinating story, please hit that like button, subscribe to Jaxom Talks, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next historical breakdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.